Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore. Boggy Talk is recorded on Boggy Bayou in Niceville, Florida, and is hosted by Justin Wyatt and James Ross, pastors at Church on Bayshore. We typically want every matter of faith and life to have crystal clear answers, but it isn't always that easy. This podcast digs in to help Christians think with a kingdom mentality about topics that sometimes get muddy and bog us down. So let's dive in.
Hey, and welcome to Boggy Talk. We are thankful you are joining us today. We are kicking off a new series as we are talking about what it means to live sent. And we're talking about roadblocks, obstacles, and objections to living sent. And to kick us off today, we are joined by two experts in our topic. And by experts, I just mean they try and they trust Jesus and his grace is sufficient. We've got Mark and Robin Nelson joining us today, who are members of our Church on Bayshore family. So you guys can say hey to everyone.
Hey. Hello.
They're so excited. And as always, joined by James Ross, who's the lead pastor here at Church on Bayshore.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah. So
hey, Mark and Robin.
Hello.
Hey, James. Hey, Justin.
Yeah, so Mark and Robin are here because they, as a couple, really, I believe, show what it means to live sent as a couple in marriage. And that's what we're talking about today is marriage and how God uses marriage for his mission and his intent to bring a man and woman together to live on mission, and how really that's really counter narrative to what our culture views of marriage and how we just exist to make each other happy and serve each other and make each other, just fulfill each other's needs. So as we talk today, they're going to be sharing about how God's been working in their family, in their marriage over time, some things they've learned, maybe things that if they had a redo, they'd do again. So we're going to start. Why don't you guys just tell us a little bit of background. How did you guys meet and fall in love?
You do that.
Well, we've known each other since we were children, went to church together. And I think my first memory of Mark was probably in Sunbeams. And if you're born in the 50s, you might know what Sunbeams.
I just picture kids wearing like sunflower hats.
No, it's like.
I just thought you made bread, like your parents made you go to church and do slave labor.
I think it's like Mission Friends.
Oh, okay.
But we used to call it.
Me for a sunbeam.
Yes,
that song. I know that song because I grew up old school Baptist.
So we've known each other for our whole lives. And we started dating in high school, and we've been married. April will be 47 years.
Woo! Yeah.
So, long time. So we came from we both came from strong Christian families. We were always in church. We were fortunate in the early 70s when we started dating. There was like a revival among young people, the Jesus movement. And so we had a very dynamic, large youth group that we grew up in, and so there was never any question about when we got married that we would be together on this, that we completely were committed to Jesus and his mission.
To help people understand kind of where we're going over the next, I think, 7 to 8 weeks, and why we thought it was important to start here, we're talking about these different objections and barriers that come about as we try to live sent, and we just really felt like probably the biggest challenge really to living sent is marriage. It can be the greatest opportunity, but also if you're not on the same page, if you don't view marriage the way God intends it, then it can be a challenge to really live in your life that way. And a lot of people I meet who I want to do that, and they don't have this, they don't deal with this, really struggle. So, as God gave you that same vision, how have you seen marriage as an opportunity for the gospel? Kind of what's your view on your marriage?
Well, to explain a little bit about what we've done since we were married. First of all, we were in the same youth group, as Robin said, and then we were married very young, but had always been a part of the church. Well, our first work in the church was we led a 5th grade training union class, which was really exciting for the 5th graders because they had teenagers basically teaching them. So
And you guys were dating.
No, we were
no,
married.
we were
You were
married.
married.
We were
Oh,
married.
sorry. I thought you said you were teenagers.
No,
and then
well,
you
we
said
were.
you
We were.
Yeah,
14 and 13.
Oh, wow.
We were
14
18 and
13.
19.
Okay, well, yeah, you know.
So we were in college.
That's
He was
right.
in college.
We were married as
working.
teenagers, so
Yeah.
we're both. I know
I
that
was
seems
thinking like
weird.
13, 14. I was like, I knew you grew up in Boggyville. But
So-
Alabama.
Yeah.
It was legal, right?
Yeah, it was legal.
As long as your daddy said it's okay.
Yeah. Well, back then, at 18, she could get married without her parents' consent,
Oh,
but I had
okay.
to have my parents' consent to marry at 19.
Oh, okay. Wow.
About
That's
that.
weird.
So,
Yeah.
but then, over the years, we have taught Sunday school classes for young marrieds. We did that at a couple of churches before this one. And, we came here back in 86, back to Niceville, and joined this church. And we taught youth for 24 years,
Wow.
and primarily the 10th grade. So our heart was, with the youth. So we developed a lot of good, relationships there, had a lot of fellowships and parties as you do as youth. So that was a really good run to do that. And so, we're retired. And so now we're involved in leading disaster relief unit here at this church because we have time, and we see a need. That's been an awesome ministry. And we're also part of a young married life group as the old mentor couple, which has kind of been extremely rewarding. But I would like to make a disclaimer that we are not, for those of you that don't know us, we're not claiming to be the perfect couple by any means. In fact, when we help out other couples, particularly younger couples, we tell them we have a lot of good examples of how not to do things that will help you. But we're two sinners saved by grace, and and so the key as far as what's helped us do mission together is we've both have sought to put God first, and our relationship with God comes first before our relationship with each other. Thank goodness we were taught that early on so that, we could survive those early tough years in marriage.
And some middle tough years too.
As well.
don't forget those.
Yeah.
But
So-
And
it's
yesterday.
That,
No,
but
just-
it's that commitment that has kept us together. It's our commitment to Christ and our commitment to each other, even during very difficult situations and difficult times.
So,
For sure.
we've been fortunate to work together, and we just kind of always felt like if there was a chance to work together, we should, because we have different spiritual gifts. Mine is teaching, hers is mercy. We have different personalities. She's a lot more in tune with what other people are thinking and their feelings and read people better than I do. So that helped a lot, particularly with youth and in mission in general. So, we know that we have to sometimes criticize each other, critique each other, and help each other along. And that's probably the most difficult part, is being able to accept criticism, kind of sanctify each other without it becoming a problem. But as far as challenges and difficulties, what do you see as some of those?
Well, you've mentioned how our marriage has helped us in ministry because we've been able to do that together. I think maybe the challenge would be the time factor. Just when you're busy raising kids, sometimes you don't have the time to put into the mission God's called you to. I think there were some years when we didn't do what we should, what God had called us to do. We kind of became we did our job at church and maybe not living with a kingdom mentality, like with our neighbors or when some relationships that we're really trying to do that now that we're not working because we were so busy. And I think that, and maybe that's not marriage, maybe that's just life, but I think that maybe was.
I know I had a tendency to compartmentalize, work and family, in church, and we were kind of brought up to just lead people to church instead of lead people to Christ. Get them to church, we'll take them from there.
Preacher will take care of them.
And just
And then you got a
general.
preacher like me. You're like, nah, we got to do it
I don't know
ourselves.
about that.
And so it was kind of like you have your church life, you have your work life, and then you have your family, and so that was a challenge. And to be honest, what made it challenging was we thought we understood the gospel. The gospel is what gets people saved, but living the gospel, boy, that we didn't strive to really understand that. We thought we were doing that sort of thing, we're doing things for God, but living the gospel has been something that we've really had to work on. And so when you're not living the gospel, it's all very challenging, and it's difficult, to do the Great Commission to make disciples. So, we've retired even, we've kind of focused our whole study on understanding the gospel. And, we've heard all life, well, it's really simple. Well, it's simple, but it's not. It requires a lot of study to truly understand it as far as how you live it, which I kind of, that's what living sent in our way of thinking really means.
You said something a bit ago, just how you'd have different gifts and different abilities. And that made me think of the first time I met you guys was actually, we had just moved to Niceville and went with you guys to Panama City for disaster relief. And I hadn't met you guys. And when I came back, Christy was like, well, who was leading it? She didn't know people yet. And so I was like, well, it was Mark and Robin. And she was like, well, what are they like? And I was like, they're just a really good team. And that stuck out to me, my first impression of
Thank
you guys,
you,
because
cool.
because I could see, Mark, you were leading, you were taking in Robin. I was like, she was just taking care of everybody. And I think that's a great picture of why God brings us together. And I found in my own marriage and in counseling and talking to other people that what is our strengths in our partner are often the things that can also drive us crazy. Because, and I think a lot of people make the mistake of trying to change the things we don't like about our spouse rather than helping them walk in their strengths. So I would ask you guys, you are very different. How have you learned over time, and how do you encourage each other to walk in your abilities and strengths rather than trying to change each other?
Well, I will answer this first. I think that I used to try to change Mark because his attention to detail was so incredible, and his staying on task. And I was just kind of like free-spirited, and I would get, frustrated because he would want me to be, I think he was trying to change me to be more like him, and I was trying to change him to be more like me. And I don't know how many years it took that we just quit doing that. And
this is impossible.
He'll analyze something like finances, for instance, retirement finances, and he has a spreadsheet and everything. And I'm like, thank you for doing that. Thank you, because he'll explain it to me, and this is where we are and what we can do and what we can't do and all that. And so I think I appreciate those differences more than I did maybe the first 20 years we were married.
Yeah.
Because it's going on 50, so it's about time
It's about time you just said thanks.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's helped is us both making each other aware of ministry opportunities. Like I said, we tended to focus too much on, ministry opportunities come from the church. Church has a plan, the church has a project. Well, what about your next door neighbor? They don't necessarily fit into a church plan or a church project, but they need Christ. And there's ministry opportunities. And so we just prayed that God would make us aware of where you want us to work, and then help us, out of the motivation of the gospel, pursue that. And so it opened up, our working together a lot more when it was thinking more about the kingdom and less about just doing church.
And praying together about opportunities, that we would both be aware of, he calls it situational awareness. And that's been a blessing that we've been able, and we have more time now that we're retired, and we do spend more time together in study and prayer, and that's been a huge blessing.
Well, with that, let's go back, because you guys were talking about how there was a season in your life when, you weren't as open to the things around you. Mm-hmm. And part of that is not living the gospel, but part of that is also, and a lot of people who are listening to this and watching this, and us included, are in that season of life where you have children, between the age of birth to, high school. And it's just, you don't relax when you come home. All that stuff is chaotic. And I was just talking to a guy the other day in our church who was saying, I want to do more for God, but my kids, and he wasn't trying to say he doesn't like his kids. And I was like, well, that is the mission. Yes, you should be showing them, but ultimately, that is the primary mission God's given you. Kind of what would be your encouragement, advice to families who do feel like, I want to be used for God, but it's really hard in the season of life that I'm in?
Well, I think, and we tell this to young couples who have kids, don't feel bad that you're not doing a lot of stuff that maybe we're doing. You've got your kids, and you need to put your focus in on them. And we used to make time, to just sit down and have Bible studies and just, talk about God. And, some of it you might say, well, that wasn't very deep. No, it wasn't deep, but it was just time together talking about God. Mm-hmm. And that we look back on that and said, boy, we should have done more of that. Mm-hmm. That was really valuable, because look how much time we spend on how you performed in, this sporting event, and you really need to develop this skill better, or you need to be tougher, and you need to be aggressive, and then you leave it at that, and you don't talk about the real truth, the thing that matters. So we had to be, I think, you need to be intentional about, talking to your kids about what's really important in life.
And I feel like, and I've told this to a lot of young families, if I knew then how fast it was going to go by, and really how much time, we've been married 47 years, and there's only been 25 that we had children in the home. So it does go by so fast. Wow. And so that is your primary goal, is to raise your children to know Jesus.
Just to give a backup, I don't think we mentioned, we have 3 kids. They're all grown, married, with kids, and they live in the local area. They're all believers, 13 grandkids. So there's 21 of us, total.
So the odds are you're going to run into one of them.
So 2 are adopted, 1 foster. So we have a big ministry with our kids and our grandkids as well. But we're also free, particularly, during the day while they're at school and stuff, to do different kinds of ministries. And helping younger couples is what we feel like where we can best, help is providing some sort of ears, and provide some advice that they seem to be more receptive to listening to an older couple than they are maybe their peers. And so we've found that to be pretty rewarding, pretty effective. We weren't sure at the beginning if they would accept us, but they seem to like that older couple.
I think it's a great thing because especially in our area, there's so many people here who don't have family around. And even if they do, it's just sometimes it's easier to talk to someone else.
It is.
And I think maybe couples in your situation and stage of life think, well, how am I going to relate to someone? Like these are people, my kids are younger than my kids even, who are grown. And I think people younger are not necessarily needing or wanting a new best friend as much as they need wisdom. We need wisdom. And so we need wisdom from people who've lived it and
I can certainly tell, and like he said before, we can tell them what mistakes we made, And one thing that I always think about is the eternal values compared to the temporary, the temporal, and that, this world is not my home. And I'm really a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And so it helps you. And I don't know if a young person can understand those 2 values I mentioned, that things go by, your life is like a mist, it goes by really fast, and put more emphasis on the eternal. And I didn't always do that, as a young mom and a mom with teenagers. But that is two things that I try to instill in the people I have the chance to mentor.
So understanding that, our children are our primary, mission field, if you want to use that language. Also, kind of maybe the other side of that is, and certainly in our community, we see this where there are families who their children and the activities of their children become everything. Mm-hmm. And their life really isn't connected to biblical community like it should be, and certainly isn't lived for the mission of God and investing in the lives of non-believers. And it's a tension. I mean, even for me, people think probably like as the pastors, like it's so easy for us, but it's a tension for us, kind of based on your experience and what you've seen. And that's the other thing you bring to the table that we don't bring is you've seen, you won't like call people's names out, but you've seen people say, hey, this is how we're going to live our life. And you've seen how it's worked in other people's lives. Mm-hmm. Kind of what would you say to the family who are wrestling with, okay, we want to care for our kids, but we also know we're supposed to be on mission. Like, how do we do that?
Oh, one of the best ways to do that is to live it as a husband and wife, as mom and dad. They're watching you. You can say a lot of stuff and it won't mean anything if you're not treating each other like you're supposed to. You're not living it because, we've heard from our grown kids that, they saw how we dealt with conflict. They saw how we loved each other, how we worked things out. And we weren't teaching them, but they were watching us. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the most important things you can do is love your husband or your wife.
But as far as like families that maybe put other things in priority over living sin, I think you can, because our kids were involved in a lot of stuff, and that's a mission field in itself.
That's right.
It really is. As long as you got your perspective and as long as you understand that there's more to that. But I think meeting other parents, like parents of the sporting teams and things like that, like I know y'all's kids are involved in that. I mean, that, and to be, my verse when I think about evangelism is, I think it's 1 Peter 3:15, always be ready to answer about the hope that's within you, but do it with gentleness and respect. And that's kind of just been the key verse that I've always leaned on when it comes, and just as you go. And like he said, there was probably some time because of the way we were raised that we thought it was all about getting them to church, but it's really not. It's more than that.
I would say another recommendation is make your home a place of worship. Intentionally invite your kids' friends over. Do something, that helps them know we're followers of Christ. There's a lot of opportunities to do ministry using your home, and just make it a place of worship. Invite families over. Invite particularly couples that may be struggling over. Invite their kids too. I mean, just make your home a place of worship. And then you're teaching your kids that's what their home
over
needs
and
to
over
be.
again. In the gospel, especially in Acts, it talks about hospitality and how important that is, and it really is.
Just read about Paul and Lydia saying, "Hey, I want you guys to meet at my home," and Paul's like, "Well, no," and she said, "No, I want that to happen." And fortunately, she won the argument, but he realized, what's wrong with this? This is a good thing. And so now she started a church. And so, I think maybe, that's a great way for us to do living sin, is to use your home, to do that.
So if you were to, as you guys have met young couples, you're meeting, you're mentoring, if you were to say, if we could do these things over, this is what we do differently.
Yeah.
What would you say? Speaking of living sent in the realm of
I know
mission.
For me that I would spend less time doing unnecessary work, and I can look back and say I didn't really need to spend that much time on that proposal or doing this project, and spending more time with your family. It's easy, particularly if you're caught up in career, to want to be the best and want to excel to the point where you sacrifice that time, and that time is so valuable that prioritizing your time. I would definitely do that, and then again, not learn how to be on mission all the time while you're doing everything else. If you are working a lot, be on mission during that working time, which is not easy in this day and time because you're not supposed to talk about God all the time, but you can, but maybe one-on-one. But so that would be, time management, and not just your Christian life, not just be the time at which you're doing church stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I would second that. I would just say that's exactly how I feel, that I would realize, I mentioned it before, that your life is a mist and it's gone so fast, and your kids grow up so fast, and there's many, many things I would do different. That's another parenting
That's right.
podcast, but we won't get into that. But, we did make mistakes. And
I know that, and I mentioned this before, but really getting into understanding the gospel, because that's your whole.
That's your power source.
That's your power source. That's your motivation. If you're doing something other than because of just appreciating what God has given you, it's worthless. I mean, you don't do stuff to earn God's, reward for you. He just wants you to appreciate that gift that he gave you. And when you really get into the gospel, you understand the magnitude of that gift. And so you just can't wait to serve him. And I guess having a deeper understanding of that sooner was what I needed, rather than the gospel is just something you really hit in the spring and in the fall during revival, and you got people saved, and then, that's all it was.
Move on. Yeah.
So for some of our couples that are watching this, or people that are watching this that are in your stage of life, often, this isn't necessarily said, but I know this is felt, to live the way you're living. So you've said, hey, we're going to serve through disaster relief and give up a lot of time, and I'm assuming money to do that. Number two is you've said, hey, we're going to join this young adult small group and really pour into them. So that means people are afraid to do that because, A, they have retirement plans and dreams and seashells they want to collect and all that stuff.
I want to do that too.
And then number two is they have their friends, and they think if I did what you did, I would lose my friends. So maybe talk about kind of why you've chosen these two things. And then, is that true? Like, do you not get to go on a cruise? Do you not get to have friends your age anymore?
Not anymore.
Well, because of COVID. Yeah. But
one shot down next week.
Again,
Second one next week.
It's no size fits all. Ask God to show you where he would like for you to work. I guarantee you he will put something in front of you. You don't have to read a book or ask James or Justin. They'll put you to work.
We got
plenty of work to do. But what you want to do is what God wants you to do, and God will tell you what to do.
He prepared for you. The good works in Ephesians, he prepared those things for you before you were born, and for you not to walk in those, it's tragic, really. And so we're partners, with God, and we, and like he said, one size doesn't fit all. There's many people, many retired people we know that are doing, exactly what God's called them to do. It's different from what we're doing, but I would challenge anyone to do what he said and ask, where do you want me? Because he's got it all prepared for us. We just have to walk into it.
And I will say that one of the things we like about this church is we know how people are allowing God to work through them that you don't hear about.
A lot of behind the scenes things.
That's what we love about this church, is there are some strong Christians, and they're not looking to get credit. They're not looking to be in the limelight, but they're keeping this church afloat, and through their prayers, through their commitment. And there's a there's a backbone in this church, and it'd be nice if we could see it as clearly. But the ones that are working that way, a lot of times you don't ever know about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And it's outside the church, it's inside the church, it's all over, and that's why we continue to want to be a part of this church.
Mm-hmm. So you do get to collect seashells though every
Of
once in a
course.
while.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and you still have friends your age.
Of course, we do.
Would you say that's just fear that Satan maybe puts in people's
Maybe,
minds?
yeah. I don't know that. I mean, anybody ever really feels that way, but if they do, sure, that's not true.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think people like what's familiar.
Yeah.
Not even just necessarily comfortable. What's familiar,
Mm-hmm.
and because as you get older, you've got people, and you're like, it gets harder and harder the older you get. I think to start over with new people because we've lived life, even now at this stage of life. I'm like, when I get to know new people, it's like, well, I've got a lot of life that I've lived that is like that's not going to be shared experience anymore. And I think that's where a lot of people, it's like, well, I just don't have the energy for it. But I'm like, we got all of eternity to spend with these people. Let's live on mission.
Well, and I figure we're 65 and 66. I think we've probably got maybe 10 good years to really be active and, maybe longer. Who knows if God blesses us. And we just want to use it the way God wants us to.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't have fun.
Yeah. And it is fun to do that. Yeah. But it doesn't mean you can't,
Probably, working together has been fulfilling
Yeah.
for sure.
Mhm.
Doing things together.
Well,
Ministry.
I just want to say that you guys are some of my favorite people.
Well, thank
and
you.
there's no perfect example, like you said, Mark, but, we need to find people who we say, look at how they're living their life and then see the principles in their lives and then apply them to your own life. And I just think your willingness to say, hey, Lord, these years we want to continue to use our health as long as we got it. And, what you've blessed us with to serve others. And what I love is disaster relief. And Mark, you're the business guy, right? But you always say our purpose is to share the gospel. And I love that because you can even get distracted by a good work like Florida Baptist Disaster Relief. So I love that. And I'm just so thankful as a pastor for how you've been willing to join one of our young adult small groups and pour into those young couples. Just thank you.
Well, we love the young couples here. They're awesome.
Well, and Tyler and Amy just really welcomed us into their group, and that that made it easy because they were so wonderful to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, next week we're going to interview your kids.
Oh, my
They're either going to
goodness.
back you up or refute everything.
We'll leave Blake off of it though, so it'll be a little better.
That's how we spend our holidays. They tell us about all the things we did wrong. Over and over. They
Our
love
kids do
it.
that now, so I've got even more to look forward to. Like, you said this the other day. I'm like, I know, don't always do what I say, just when I'm doing it right. But we do really want to thank you guys for sharing and really just it's really an overflow of how you live your lives. And we're thankful that for God's faithfulness in the past and what he's doing in you guys now and what he's going to do in the years to come. And just thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome,
and
Justin.
what a picture of what it means to live sent on mission. And so if you have any questions regarding what we shared, feel free to send us a message. You can just send that to justin@churchonbayshore.org. If you're not connected in any kind of community and you're a part of this church, we want you to be. If you need someone like this in your life, we want to connect you. So you just let us know if you're not a part of this church and you don't have that where you are part of a church, you need to seek that out. It's vital to how we live our lives. We need people around us to spur us on. We need people ahead of us in the race to give us wisdom. It's by God's design. It's part of the design of the church. So thanks for joining us. Next week, we continue in this series, and we're talking about the Bible. And how do we know we can trust the Bible? Certainly that's a question that comes up, an objection that people have as we start to have conversations about faith. Why do we trust the Bible as authority? And how do we even know that we can trust the Bible as authority? So we hope you will join us for that. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.